All right.
Hello to everyone that has already joined us. We're going to give it just a couple more minutes for more folks to join, and then we'll get started. Still seeing a few folks joining, so I'll give it another minute or so, but good to see everyone here. All right, I think it's probably good to get started now. So thanks everyone for joining. We're really excited to have two really amazing speakers tonight who are going to be speaking about strategies for integrating climate science into the elementary classroom. My name is Gina and I am the CLEAN program coordinator, and I will be monitoring the chat throughout the webinar. So if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them there. I'm also going to be dropping some links into the chat, some helpful resources as Tiffany and Alicia are speaking. So make sure to check those out as we go along. So without further ado, we have Tiffany Boyd joining us. She represents Classrooms for Climate Action. She is a retired elementary school teacher who has been working for 27 years as an elementary school teacher. And then our second speaker is Alicia Christensen, who works with me at the Cooperative Institute for Research in Environmental Sciences at CU Boulder. And she works in our education outreach program with CLEAN as well. So unless I missed anything, I'm gonna ask them to jump right in.
Okay, great. Thanks, Gina. My name is Alicia, and today we're going to be talking about various strategies you can use to integrate climate science into the elementary classroom. I've spent some time working with a variety of elementary teachers through a lot of the informal education institutions that I've been a part of. So excited to talk with you all today. And we'd like to start out by doing a little bit of visioning and a little bit of hope. So we want you to imagine it's the year 2040. What do you hope the world will look like? Put your answer in the chat. Mhm. Hot, clean and green, great. Peace, yeah, that would be nice. It's very apt for the situation right now. One of the reasons why we do this exercise is because, especially for young learners, I think for all learners, but especially for young learners, it's really important to focus on hope, and not necessarily an unrealistic hope, but hope that that there will be some beautiful things in the future. And so wanted us to start out by just thinking a little bit about that. And appreciate all of you joining us today. So we're going to be talking about how to integrate the topic of climate into your classroom. And we hear from a variety of elementary teachers that they have trouble finding resources to integrate this topic into their classrooms. And the topic can sometimes be fraught with challenges related to parent and administrative support, integration with standards, complexity, and student anxiety around the problems associated with climate change. So we hope that today we can help you address some of these challenges, and highlight why it's so important to start integrating foundational principles related to climate in the elementary grades, and discuss how you can connect climate topics to things that you're already teaching. So we're going to be spending the first kind of part today highlighting why it's important to teach about climate science in elementary, and then we'll address concerns and provide strategies for integrating climate into the classroom. Just to give you a little bit of overview about CLEAN, the Climate Literacy and Energy Awareness Network. It's a national database and network supported by NOAA, NSF, NASA, and the Department of Energy that can help you find quality resources for integrating climate into your classroom. It includes over 800 resources now of peer-reviewed resources by both other teachers as well as scientists, to look at both kind of the pedagogy as well as the science accuracy in the resources. It includes lesson plans and data visualizations, videos, all about climate and energy that you can use in your classrooms. And you'll see under the link that Gina put in the chat, if you look under refine the results. So if you type in something to search for and then click under refine the results, you can click on the grade level band you're interested in finding resources for. So we have 2 grade level bands for elementary. We have kindergarten through 2nd grade and 3rd through 5th. You can also type a specific topic into the search bar under the explore the collection. So just last year and this year, I think we've added over 100 new elementary resources and a variety of support pages too that can help you integrate climate into your classroom and talk about some of the stuff that we're going to talk about in the webinar today. We'll be continuing also from here on out to add more and more peer-reviewed resources. If you guys know of any, you have your own, you're welcome to submit them to the CLEAN collection for review. You'll find a lot of lesson plan templates, pages with tools and tips for elementary teachers, and webinars. In addition, there are the webinars that may be of interest to you outside of this particular one that we're going over today. And then the network also includes weekly meeting discussions that you can join, and it's made up of a variety of professionals who are committed to improving climate and energy literacy across the nation. So I'm going to turn it over now to Tiffany, and she's going to talk about why it's so important to talk about climate in the elementary grades.
Great. Thanks, Alicia. So my name is Tiffany Boyd, and I'm happy to be here with all of you today. When I think about the pedagogy that I have always used, whether it's in the classroom or with professional development, it's that gradual release of responsibility. So thinking about, let's model with some examples first, and then we can get a little bit more into the guts of why. And at the end, we're going to give you guys a chance to brainstorm ways that you might be able to integrate climate science into lessons that you're already teaching. So the thing that's so amazing and awesome about teaching climate science is that it does fit everywhere. So I'm going to give you two examples here. One was more of a science-based lesson, and one was more of a social studies-based unit. So things that are interdisciplinary, elementary teachers just get it. They just know how to integrate things, how to bring in the reading, the writing, the math, the science, the social studies into units. So that's something that's already in our wheelhouse and something that's a great forte for elementary educators. And also learning driven by student interest, right? So project-based learning is where you get kids on board and match their interest level. So on the right hand side, some students here in Colorado who were trying to figure out, what does Colorado contain, Colorado need, how do we grow pollinator friendly plants with the kind of soil that we have. And so these kids were studying the outside garden in, this was January, staring at the dirt, trying to figure out what was going to be planted there. On the left, we are change makers, and this unit ended up being project-based learning where we had 6 different groups. This a lot of the kids were really interested in electric school buses and how electric school buses contribute to the decrease of greenhouse gases. We had a large component of this unit was about climate justice. The kids made a video with a group called Mothers Out Front, and were able to teach people about the importance of electric buses. So from the science of greenhouse gases and from the data of how much diesel fuel of buses puts into the environment, kids were able to turn their science knowledge into advocacy for making a video about promoting electric buses. So that's just one example. The next slide shows a little bit about the agency and the hope component to climate science education. So with all of us, when kids learn the science, then they want to take action. And I truly believe that activism is education. And when kids' knowledge is rooted in climate science, they have the facts to take forward to take action. So on the top right here, we have kids who decided they wanted to do a climate strike walkout at their school. And so they made signs for all the different project-based learning groups that they learned about. And they had a climate action rally. The kids down here on the left were from the pollinator group. There was a bill in the Colorado legislature at the time that was banning neonicotinoids, which are very harmful to pollinators and also to people. And so these kids learned the science behind these pesticides and went to the state capitol to educate their legislators about the science. So again, this is just kind of that full circle. When you think about teaching climate science, the kids want to take action. It leads to agency and a part of that hope that we talked about at the very beginning, because hope comes through knowledge and knowledge comes through agency. And when kids feel like they can make an impact on their own future and also on their community, it's a great day to be a teacher, right? So, and then the next slide. At this point, we just wanted to pause, and you can pop some things in the chat. What are some of the concerns that you have about teaching climate science in the classroom? So if there's particular things that you're thinking about, go ahead and pop them into the chat, and Gina and Alicia will be able to see those. And I think we'll just keep going. Does that sound good to you, Alicia? We should just keep going while people put those in the chat. Okay. So we can always come back to these toward the end. But you're right. I think the eco-anxiety part, Beatrice, thanks for putting that in there. That's something we're definitely going to address. Losing faith in adults. Oh my gosh, right? I mean, there's a lot, the eco-anxiety part and things like that are really huge. And we are going to address a lot of those things, especially the controversy and things like that. So you can keep them flowing in the chat there. And I think we'll just, we'll press on here. So some of the reasons why it's important to teach climate science at the elementary level, it's a really unique opportunity, right? Elementary classrooms are a place where inquiry happens, where students are interested, where we can weave together disciplines, and we can also make sure we lead with hope and lead with agency. Curiosity is definitely our priority. We have kids who we can help guide them to examine different stakeholders and who's affected. And that's another reason why this is such a good topic for elementary school. So in a recent NPR poll, this is in 2019, most of the teachers think that it's very important to teach about climate change, but less than half actually do. So this graphic shows some of the reasons why teachers don't teach climate change. And so you can know that you are not alone. Some of the things you're popping into the chat are definitely on this national poll. So we'll just go ahead and go to the next slide. Some of the things we're going to be describing today, some of the several strategies and approaches to climate science and teaching and learning with elementary learners are outlined on the clean climate and energy pages. So those will be great resources for you. You could read more about those. There's lots of examples in the clean collection that can help clarify what all these different strategies are. So we're going to go over all these strategies with you today. And you can click on any of these when you go to this page and get more information about each of the strategies. Okay, let's see, next slide. So when you click on the strategies link on that web page, it's going to take you to a page with 8 different strategy pages and links to all these related resources. So you can take a look at this and see how the strategy page is organized. And we're going to highlight almost all these strategies in the next few slides. We just dropped a link to that in the chat. And many educators across all grade levels, they worry that climate change is too controversial to explore with students. Clean has a really detailed page about that, addressing the controversial topics and some strategies that can be helpful for navigating these concerns in your classroom because they're legitimate. An important distinction to make here is between science-related social controversies and scientific controversies, because the science of climate change is not controversial among professional climate scientists. There is overwhelming consensus that rapidly accelerating and human-induced climate change is taking place. Instead, the issue has become socially controversial because of its ethical implications, potential solutions, and its associations with different political beliefs. One important strategy is to cultivate foundational climate science understandings in the early years by teaching fundamental scientific concepts, relationships, and processes in order to prepare young learners to deepen their understanding of the complex climate and energy systems that come later in their learning in the middle and high school years. One way to do this is to focus on the climate science learning with concrete data, local phenomenon, using key NGSS scientific practices, asking questions, planning and carrying out investigations, making observations, analyzing and interpreting data, constructing explanations, communicating evidence-based arguments about the data, and supporting data literacy and data interpretation skills that also help students understand how climate change inequitably impacts different people in different communities. So we're going to go ahead. I'm going to pass it off to Alicia now, and she's going to talk a little bit about the science-related social controversy.
So as we're thinking about climate change as a science-related social controversy, please take a moment to respond to this question in the chat. You may be surprised. What % of parents do you think believe that climate change should be taught in the classroom? We have some guesses here, 65, 40%. Okay, 65%. Okay, great to hear that you haven't gotten any pushback when you teach it. Someone says 80%. All right, well, let's see here. So data from the same 2019 NPR poll shows that there is broad support actually for teaching and learning about climate change that cuts across political beliefs, which may be surprising in our current political climate, but more than 80% of parents surveyed believe that schools should teach about climate change. So that's a really high percentage. This indicates that teaching about climate science and climate change is less controversial than we actually may assume. And the vast majority of families believe that this topic is important for their children to learn about in school. At the national level, the Biden administration has also signaled their commitment to moving beyond the social controversy associated with climate change in order to address the urgency of the climate crisis through policy approaches that center environmental and climate justice. As these ideas and policies become more frequently discussed in the US, mainstream media, they will hopefully help to move us towards social, political, and ethical consensus that really aligns with the scientific consensus that already exists. Scientific consensus about climate change is also evident in the Conference of the Parties, the UN Climate Summit that took place at the end of last year, where world leaders established several new agreements to reduce emissions and respond to climate change. However, activists and leaders, especially youth activists, did criticize the summit for the exclusion of countries and communities who are being most impacted, will be most impacted by climate change. And so these national and international conversations demonstrate that the social controversy around these issues should be discussed as they are about ethical obligations and human rights. Tiffany.
So there's a lot of good conversation going on in the chat. Everyone's bringing up some really good points about getting kids outside, getting kids to fall in love with nature, and also the idea that the larger fish to fry is kind of industry and the fossil fuel. And there's a lot that we can say later on about that, about how does this fit in with a particular elementary unit that you're designing. So given the importance of families and community perspectives and expertise in supporting student learning, another way to manage the social controversies of climate change is to facilitate climate learning that's personally relevant, culturally sustaining, and that highlights multiple perspectives. Many folks within our communities are already experiencing the realities and impacts of a changing climate, and it's important for us as educators to listen, to amplify, and to help address these concerns through our work with our learners. By following the lead of students and their families and communities, you can identify climate-related phenomena and issues that are highly relevant for learners in their everyday lives, including justice-related issues. For example, they may be interested in exploring the changes they have noticed in their local creek ecosystem, the well-being of different species living in the creek, and the different culturally specific relationships between local communities and the creek. These kinds of inquiry experiences create spaces for students and families to use the science-related sense-making practices that are familiar and significant in their own cultural communities. These personally relevant approaches can help students see deep connections between their everyday lives and climate science learning, rather than thinking of climate change as a distant and controversial issue to something that's in their own backyard. Building these long-term collaborative partnerships with community experts such as family members, community leaders, business owners, tribal scientists, elders, folks who work in agriculture and service industries, and educators at environmental centers can also help center multiple perspectives, different value systems, and ways of knowing regarding local climate issues, including multiple stakeholders and cultural perspectives in meaningful and sustained ways in your science learning activities and resources is really important for centering non-dominant voices and leadership, worldviews, ethical systems, and climate-related priorities. All these collaborations support perspective taking, respectful dialogue, and these are really important ways to engage with socially controversial topics. Collaborating with local experts also helps you as an educator because you're not doing this work alone, and it takes a team. On the next slide, so, thinking about what climate justice and climate science, what local issues might be relevant to your students. So when you think about climate justice, I gave that one example of students that were thinking about electric school buses and how important that was for communities that were particularly impacted by climate change, and students being able to ride an electric bus that live in some of these impacted communities was one way that we were able to focus climate justice into that particular unit. So go ahead and thinking about maybe some disproportionately impacted communities in your local area. What are some ways that you can embed some climate justice and climate science into something that you're already teaching? If you have some ideas about that, you can pop those into the chat. And we can come back to those at the end too. So with some of this in mind, looking at local phenomenon and issues that are happening in your community, let's go ahead and go to the next slide as you guys are putting your ideas in the chat about that. These are some things that we've been doing in the last month to respond to the Marshall Fire. So I live in Louisville, Colorado, and some of you who follow national news might have heard about the fire that took place here on December 30th in Boulder County. So that involved kind of unincorporated Boulder, Superior, and Louisville. Over 1,100 structures were burned and impacted on December 30th. We had a fire and really, really strong winds, and the combination of that led to our evacuation of our town. I live in Louisville, and Superior evacuated. And I have many friends and know many kids who lost their home in the fire. So coming back in and teaching climate after the fire, some interesting perspectives that we had to think about. We have, for example, coming in to work with a group of first graders, and over, I would say about a quarter of the kids in each class had actually lost their homes. And so we decided to pivot and to talk about floods instead. So just being empathetic, being willing to use the topic of climate, but also being able to think about things that families are going through. One of the things, the picture in the top right is from a unit we're currently doing with fifth graders that are exploring the invasive species of cheatgrass. And so one of the things that happened in our Marshall Fire, cheatgrass is something that grows, it's an invasive species that grows in our open space, and it really ignited during this Marshall Fire and was just really carried the fire across our open spaces towards our suburban areas. So one of the climate adaptations that is going to be happening in our area, because the West is so fraught with drought right now, is more prescribed burns. And so teaching the kids about sort of the history of prescribed burns, bringing in indigenous knowledge and the reasons why prescribed burns happen is something we've been talking about with the fifth graders. Down here, you can see the kids exploring with flood models. We went through all these cool science experiments They were learning how to slow down water and how to create a floodway that absorbed the most water. So they tested with sand and dirt and gravel and all these different grasses, and they were water engineers, and they had to go in and build a floodway that would absorb and slow down the water the most. That particular unit led to some climate communication. You can see the kids here are all working on public service announcements. So they're all creating their own art. And then with the QR code, these will be hanging up all around town, and people can go up and use their smartphone, scan the QR code, and listen to a second grader. This is a second grade project, teach them about climate change and climate action. The top left is one of our local representatives, Joe Neguse, who is in the US Congress. And Joe Neguse came into the second grade, and the kids were able to teach him and thank him for the infrastructure bill, which is providing a lot of money for the state of Colorado for infrastructure around charging stations and different things that are helping our climate. So those are just some things that we've been doing locally in response to the fire, so that kids can realize that the fires were tied to climate change and using it as a learning opportunity. All right, next slide is Alicia.
I'm reading some of the comments in the chat, and actually we're going to address some of these comments. So one of the comments here, I think, is about adults asking children to come up with solutions to climate change. And I think that the key to that is reassuring them that there are multiple people working on the problems, and providing examples of adults out there who are working on the problems, so that they don't feel like it is completely up to them. Letting them know that it is not completely up to them is really important. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but I wanted to address that comment. One of the concerns that we've heard, and I think I saw this earlier in the chat, was actually the complexity of climate change and not having enough time, or doesn't meet standards. And one of the great things about climate science is that it is multidisciplinary. It doesn't have to be taught instead of or in addition to, but it can be taught as part of social studies, math, language arts, etc. The world is interdisciplinary, and climate science is a perfect phenomenon to help students understand how it is multidisciplinary. And though there are many complex relationships in climate systems thinking is an important skill for younger students to learn, and also possible if taught in the right way, by focusing on relationships, multivariables, scale, and the reality that humans are part of these systems. If you keep an eye out, about once a year, we offer a webinar actually called Understanding Global Climate Change by UC Berkeley folks. And they have a great set of framework and kind of icons and things that you can use with students to get them to start understanding how systems work. And though you may not go into the real complexity of climate science, there's a lot of precursors to that, looking at weather and understanding patterns in weather, and kind of some of the systems that are involved in weather, for example, that definitely meet NGSS standards. Research also suggests that linear thinking, so when there's like one cause, one effect, may actually be a cultural phenomenon, and that Indigenous cultures and non-dominant communities are more inclined to reason in complex ways. So focusing on kind of the web-like relationship-focused systems, again, can allow for greater attention to family and community knowledge, and actually allows for many entry points. It honors the backgrounds and experiences of all students, and help students understand how they are part of these systems. Field-based science practices across time and space, and open-ended inquiry, of course, are great tools to help students start to think in this way. Using their natural curiosity one of the highlighted resources in the CLEAN collection, I've talked about this, the Understanding Global Climate Change Project, has a bunch of great resources. So I'd encourage you to check that out in our CLEAN collection, and learn more about kind of that, how to foster some of that systems thinking. And, here's just some examples of places in the CLEAN collection. You can sort in our CLEAN collection through different tags like math, art, reading, writing. And we also have some in the support pages, we have some reading lists of books. And climate science, as Tiffany shared earlier, is also an excellent topic to study in social studies. The C3 framework for social studies highlights the ideas that our democratic republic will not sustain unless students are aware of their changing cultural and physical environments. So know the past, read, write, and think deeply, and act in ways that promote the common good. You can also search the collection by NGSS standards, and we have a support page that outlines how standards in life science, physical science, earth science, and engineering and design can align with climate science. So this support page that you'll find in the CLEAN collection, it outlines how the NGSS science and engineering practices and the core disciplinary ideas and cross-cutting concepts all connect to climate science. And there are tables by grade level on this page that explain how the relevant disciplinary core ideas connect to climate change, which can be incredibly helpful when a standards may not at first seem like it connects to climate. So the example here that you see on the page, heating or cooling a substance may cause changes that can be observed, actually connects to climate when talking about sea level rise and the greenhouse effect. So a standard doesn't have to say climate to be relevant to climate science. So this is something that, of course, there's been a lot of comments about in the chat, and something I think that we become ever more familiar with as we see more natural disasters happening, and I think anxiety of learners continuing to increase, and so there's definitely some strong emotions out there amongst our young learners. The thing is, those strong emotions are going to be there whether you teach about climate science or not, and whether you engage them in solutions-oriented action or not. And that solutions-oriented action actually really helps them to take something that feels very out of control for them and turn it into something that they do feel like they have control over. Again, with the caveat that you're also reminding them that they're not the only ones doing this. It is not their responsibility. We would welcome their help and love their help with this, but it is not their responsibility. And, some research indicates actually like kind of apologizing to students and saying, we're sorry that our generation and the generations before us have, kind of caused this climate crisis, can be helpful too, again, so they don't feel like it's totally their responsibility. So, action takes, like I said, those uncontrollable feelings of anxiety and turns them into something that students really feel that they can do something about. And it's important to listen to their concerns and anxieties and listen to their ideas about what they can do to help. That's what really empowers them. That's what makes them feel better about those anxieties. Thinking about encouraging them to think about how they can use their own school to turn their ideas into action. Growing gardens, for example, to make their own food cuts down on the amount of fossil fuels needed to transport food to their school. Planting more trees helps take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Doing an energy audit of their school can help students understand how much energy they actually use so that they can develop solutions to cut back on this energy usage. Many students are living, to the impacts of climate change, especially the more marginalized groups are disproportionately affected by climate change, making this also a racial justice issue involving power and privilege. So it's important to talk about it. It's important to not ignore it. And collective action, I think, is especially helpful, again, because it helps the students realize that they aren't alone. It's important to connect them to some of those BIPOC leadership in their community, and if you don't have a super diverse community, providing examples that there's a ton of youth activists out there that are really active on social media and other places, and providing some examples there. And, ages 8 to 11 really are a foundational time to inspire kids for this environmental action. And you don't need to focus much, if at all, on the impacts. Research indicates that if you focus more on the solutions and just engaging students and being responsible citizens, that that practice and just that behavior actually can come before understanding what is actually at stake with the climate crisis. And then when they do start to learn more about the climate crisis, it feels less overwhelming because they have some actions and solutions that they can use to help with mitigating some of the effects of climate change. So I think, it's just important that you want to, by doing this stuff, that it helps them to approach the overwhelmingness with an attitude towards action and knowing things there are things they can do that are within their control. If you search action within the Clean collection, you'll come up with a whole variety of videos and lessons. Dreaming in Green is an example. Young Voices for the Planet. It highlights examples of student-led collective action, especially of diverse voices. And then another key way, and I saw this in some of the comments that you guys have made too, about avoiding anxiety and despair, especially for elementary students, is to foster an appreciation and love of nature. Just get them outdoors. Encourage caretaking, especially of living things. Elementary students empathize really easily with animals that are out there, even bugs and insects. You can do things that help them connect more with their environment too, by assigning names actually to animals and pronouns to living things. For a lot of time, I think in education, there was this focus on not bringing in some of these personal things and trying to make things seem very objective. But what they found is it actually decreased the connection that students had with the environment. I've seen this in action. I worked with a group of kids who came outside terrified of the bugs and bees and, would run screaming away. But after just 1 or 2 outdoor sessions, that utilize some of these practices of connecting them, caretaking, building homes for them, assigning them names and pronouns. The same students, that were just super afraid ended up saving a bee that had ended up in their local pool by scooping it up with their hands. So their fear had turned to empowerment. So though the students may not always make a direct connection between the animals they are caring for and the climate, that's okay. The goal at this age is to get them to appreciate, love, and not fear their environment, so that as they get older, their personal connection will empower them to take action. Other things you can do is you can encourage role playing. There's a resource in Clean that weaves role playing along with songs and play. Young learners can use their imaginations or wear costumes of animals to better understand their needs. Older elementary students love to talk about fairness, so this can be a great age to start to introduce the idea of justice and discuss inequitable land or resource use, adverse health impacts, food security, or disproportionate impacts from shifting lands and waters. So providing some of that perspective taking. Pair these conversations with ways students can take action to bring about a more just world. And then another important strategy, I think, for this age and for this particular concern is to keep the instruction fun, experiential, grounded in their environment. Play with the kids, allowing them to guide their learning. Avoid the words, be careful, which is hard. I know, I'm a parent with a 3-year-old, and I find myself saying that a lot. And I try to be careful when, especially we're outdoors, because that really sits with them and lasts with them, so that as they're adults, they're going to be, more fearful of things in the environment. Research has shown, that adults who spend a lot of time exploring the outdoors as kids actually exhibit more pro-environmental behaviors than those that did not. And kids who learn to love nature at an early age are more likely to protect it when they get older. There's some wonderful clean resources to make learning about climate fun. There's a rap song about climate change. There's an extension to the popular board game Settlers of Catan that integrates climate change into the system. And this resource here, Catch the World's Oceans, that can serve as a fun icebreaker and kinesthetic game for younger learners to do outside. Okay, now that was enough for me. Tiffany.
Yeah, so this next one just talks a little bit about a common thought by elementary educators that perhaps they don't understand the topic thoroughly enough. And this is where it's just really important to, throw up your hands and agree that you don't have all the answers and look for help. So there's just so many people in every community that would love to partner with you and to bring knowledge in, and so that you don't have to feel like you do have to know it all, because we don't, right? So learning, this is another thing that elementary educators are so good at, about saying, I don't know, let's find out. So really modeling your own questions, your own inquiry process, your own curiosity, and leaving things open-ended and helping kids to ask great questions, and then where are we going to go to find that out? So lots of opportunities to partner with different, whether it's retired scientists, different community people that want to come in and act as resources. Then on the next slide, when we talk a little bit about, I don't know enough about climate science, but focusing on these real issues that are happening around you really help to kind of ground and bring in other experts, right? So finding out what students are interested in, what's important to them, what's happening around you, connected. Is it a local bag tax for plastic bags? Is it for us, the Marshall fires? Is it a recent flood? Is it an issue around water scarcity? Is there something that's happening in a community park, and that there's different stakeholders around how open space is going to be used, and the urbanization of a habitat for an animal? There's always something happening locally that really makes sense to engage kids around, because then it's real. And then you can look at all the stakeholders, and it's an amazing opportunity to teach empathy, and also that advocacy that comes from figuring out how this is impacting different people and animals and plants. One of the things that we've learned a lot through this view of issues as stakeholders is that the planet is a stakeholder, right? And how can we view what the planet needs when we're thinking about all the stakeholders? So on next slide. So we've reviewed a lot of these different strategies. So we were just going to ask you to pick one of these that maybe resonated with you, and think about one of these strategies and how you might use them to help you plan and integrate climate into something like an upcoming unit that you have this spring in your curriculum, or maybe something you're in the middle of right now. Is there something that we talked about that might be a great fit when it comes to some of these strategies? So if you have an idea, go ahead and pop it in the chat, because we learn from each other. We would love to see what you have there. And I think, is this the point too when we're going to transition to the Jamboard? So we're going to drop in the chat to a Jamboard, and we can make sure, I think we can make sure that the Jamboard is available, right, to everyone who's in the webinar at the end. So I just put a couple here to get you started. So thinking about ways that you can connect. So in math, for example, you've all seen the graph of climate change and the heating up of our planet. How could you use graphs related to climate change and the impact of climate change in a math class? Another thing is, another unit that we're in the middle of right now is looking at all the stakeholders that utilize water from the Colorado River, and how we're going to do a role play activity where different kids are taking on different roles of stakeholders related to this scarce resource on the Colorado River. So as you think about something that you're in the middle of, how could you bring climate into it? And go ahead, and if you haven't used Jamboard before, we're making it so you can all jump on there now. What you do is you grab over here, you grab a sticky note. It's the 1, 2, 3, fourth one down. So you click on a sticky note, and then you can just type right on it, and you post it right onto this Jamboard. And now that everyone has the link in the chat, you can click onto the Jamboard. Hopefully, oh yeah, people are joining. Great. We're seeing all the anonymous animals appearing. So yeah, so we just put a couple there to get you started, but this is another place for you to add some of your ideas as you're thinking about how some of these strategies might help you connect climate science to things that are already in your curriculum. And some of you are probably familiar with Jamboard. If you're not, you just click on the fourth one down, which looks like a sticky note, and you can type right on it. You can even change, pop it on there, and feel free to start adding some.
Great. And as you add those two, I just want to finish up today by saying thanks so much for coming. And Tiffany and I will be around for questions and discussion after this. We'd love to see some of your ideas on the Jamboard so that teachers can get other ideas as well. And there are many more resources available through CLEAN, including a variety of relevant webinars on climate and energy. There's actually one that's going to be in April during Earth Week. I want to say it's on April 18th or 19th, but it's all about kind of mental health and climate change. And I know a lot of you seem to be really interested in that. So we'd love to see you at that one. Just go to our webinar page and you can sign up for that. It'll be run actually by someone who used to be a clinical psychologist and specializes in trauma related to natural disasters. And you'll also see here that we have a webinar later this week, actually. And that's just about kind of teaching about climate and energy with CLEAN. It goes more into some of the climate and energy principles and some of the science behind that. And then we really invite you to become involved. There's a lot of different ways. You can use the CLEAN resources, attend our webinars. You can sign up for our newsletter on our homepage, and that's our CLEAN STEM Flash. You can submit a resource to CLEAN. So I noticed some people on here, like there was a book and some other things. So if you have resources, go ahead and submit them to CLEAN. You can join the CLEAN network, which is basically they meet weekly. It's a group of scientists and educators to talk about some of the current issues in climate education. And you can make a presentation on one of those CLEAN network telemeetings, especially if it's something you're looking for feedback on. You can see CLEAN presentations at some of our science teaching workshops and conferences. And then we are looking for teacher ambassadors too. So if you really enjoyed today and learning about these resources, if you currently use CLEAN resources in your classroom, we're looking for people to present about clean at local conferences, and you can receive a small stipend and get your regional conference paid for if you sign on to be an ambassador. So thank you so much, and we'll spend the rest of the time available for questions and discussion. Lots of great ideas on the Jamboard. Great to see. Compost and pollinator health. Yeah, there's so much that can be done with pollinators, and pollinators can be found basically everywhere.
And you can keep putting questions or comments in the chat or raise your hand. Are we able to unmute people or no? I guess not in this format. It's all in the chat, right?
We can move them to a presenter. So if somebody really wants to talk, I think you should be able to raise your hands and we can move you to a presenter. So it looks like we have.
I see Dave and Kathy have their hands up, and I
Yeah.
have the ability to allow them to talk, actually. I have a
Okay,
button
sure,
that
that'll
does
work.
that. So
Yeah.
I'll unmute Dave first.
Okay.
Dave, you might have to unmute yourself. There we go.
There you go. Well, I just want to talk to everybody about our book, The Green Actioneers Family Action Guide, which is a coloring book for little kids, full of word games for older kids. It's in English and it's in Spanish, and it's full of quotations throughout, and it has a Where's Waldo feature that makes it fun to go through, and it tells the story of 4 families and their path to green. I'm in Florida, and in Florida, we don't talk much in school about climate change or global warming or sea level rise, because we have a lot of people here who would come in and get angry at the principal if we did. So instead, we've got a book that talks about solutions. It's 100% solutions. It's not the problem at all. Teachers can bring up the problem if they wish, but they don't need to. And this is parent run. Teachers are up to here with things to do. This gives the parents a role, and there's a green-hearted parent in every school who would love to introduce this program. We introduce it like scholastic books, so that they hold family night in the school, and every family gets a book as they come into the room, and they sit down and go through the book together and decide on the things that they know they can do. And the kids get really excited. We have a game we play where the kids get excited about all the different things that they can do to go green. So this takes the load off the teacher. She doesn't have to talk about the problem. Instead, we just focus on solutions, and the parents take the brunt of the hit. If there's anybody who gets angry, we have a slide that says whether the climate is changing or not, and whether people are responsible or not, our kids deserve a clean, green future. Let's give it to them. So if we get any parents in there who get irritated about what we're teaching, we make sure that they understand that what we're doing is helping the kids to have a clean, green future. And if you're a hunter and you want more game, we're doing what you want. If you're a fisherman and you want to eat the fish you catch, then great. If you're a farmer and you want clean soil, we're on your side. If you're a laborer and you work outside in the sun, we're helping you out. So this is what we're trying to do, is not irritate anybody, but come in an acceptable way. I did a previous program called Climate Change is Elementary, and I did that program in schools in Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, and Colorado, where I could talk about climate change. And in every school that I went to, there was somebody who came in loaded for bear and was really angry because we were talking about this subject. So we've reframed it. It's not Climate Change is Elementary anymore. Now it's Green Actioneers. And I just want people to know that it exists and is available.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for sharing. That sounds like a great idea to focus on just green solutions in the environment versus climate. Thank you. Kathy.
All right.
Hi.
Yeah, there we go.
So Dave, I'm very excited. I'm sitting here with actually I'm not with him, but I have a 2.5-year-old grandson, and I would love to have a copy of your Green Actioneers book. But anyway, that aside, it sounds like a wonderful program, and I think you nailed it. Teachers are really exhausted. They've got so much to do. It's really awesome that you're thinking about how you can involve parents and community members in your program. Okay, that being said, let me get to where I was. So I'm a retired elementary classroom teacher, and I currently now do, well, many things, but one of the things I was wondering about was, Alicia, you mentioned research 2 or 3 times. I came in late, so my guess is you mentioned it a lot even before I got here. But so I'm wondering if there's access to some of the research that you mentioned so that it can be used in conversations with other professional learning providers in terms of really thinking about the importance of doing this at elementary grade levels and stuff. Okay, so that's just one of the things. And I had another question, and now, and then my other question, I think I did put it in the chat, was does Clean have any resources that are specific to professional learning providers? So those are my biggies.
Okay. In answer to your first question, yes, I can get your, if you put your email in the chat, then I can send you a couple of the papers that I reference in the talk. There's also going to be we're creating some new strategy pages kind of around climate and mental health too. And so that should be going up this spring. That'll have a ton of references and resources. If you check to our elementary pages, so the pages that we were referring to throughout this webinar, you'll actually see lots of links that take you to various different places that talk about, kind of some of the research or some of the ideas behind what are on those pages and what's in the webinar here today. And then in answer to your second question, so you were saying, meaning, do we have resources specifically for the professional learning?
So as a presenter, right, if I'm going to go work with teachers or coach teachers or whatever, right, whatever the situation is, do a conference myself even, are there, a specific, do you have anything specific thinking about adult learning theories and the way adults learn and that kind of thing already developed? Or, because one of the things I think I do a lot of lately, but I haven't even thought about it, is that in my own, one of the lives I lived, after I was a elementary science elementary teacher for many years, I worked for the Vermont Department of Education as their elementary science and math professional learning and assessment providers. But anyway, one of the things that I was privileged to be able to do, was learn a lot about adults as learners. And we use the work of Jane Veller and dialogue education and others. Right. So anyway, that's what I was asking.
Great question. We don't currently have really anything like that. Our main audience for the Clean resources are really teachers of, K to, well, even pre-K up to college level, but they're aimed at resources that the teachers can use with students. We don't have resources on there that are resources just kind of for the teachers to learn about how to, present some of this to like other teachers, for example.
Mhm.
With that said, though, I think that you can look through the resources, and there's plenty of examples in there that you might be able to use, in a teacher professional development workshop.
Yeah, I understand that, because I can probably take anything, and think
Mhm.
about how I would do that. I was just wondering if you had
Yeah.
anything that was specifically developed for that reason.
Yeah,
Thinking of
we do
thinking
not, but
about,
great
yeah.
idea. Really great idea.
Well, one of the reasons is, one of my big things is I'm a huge advocate for elementary science to, in general, right? Just getting it as to be part of the curriculum. But going beyond that and thinking about that, especially at the pre-K 2 level, where not that, mainly because of the need for, and yet the need for balance in terms of math, literacy, and science and social
Yeah.
studies, especially at K2. And I go both ways. I can listen to arguments, I taught young, really little ones, and I also, the end of my career was more with fourth, fifth, and sixth graders. But um, just really thinking about, how do we help K2 teachers see how they can do this work? That's kind of where
Hmm.
where my head is at. So.
Yeah. In my experience, I've found one of the things that works best for those really young learners is nature play. Um,
Hmm.
and getting them out to care for bugs and insects, and doing a lot of role playing with costumes and things like that. I think that's what really sparks their interest in the outdoors.
Well, and the other thing, this is my own, I've really got that interest as myself, and so there's a piece of me that wants to really develop an integrated unit that really does a nice lot, so that's kind of in the
Uh-huh.
back of my head, using all things that have been talked about. So anyway.
Yeah. Also, Tiffany works with teachers to, help them integrate a lot of this. So, and she loves to brainstorm with people. So she put her information in the chat if you'd like to
Yeah, I'm
brainstorm some more with her.
trying to grab it right now.
Mhm.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Are there any other questions out there, comments? Okay. Well, I think that that's it. And thank you so much for joining us. If for those people that may still be on, and join us at one of our future webinars.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Just before I go, I want to say thanks again. I wish I'd caught the first half, because I missed it. I'm hoping
Oh, no
there's a
worries.
recording. I can go back and watch the beginning. So thank
Yes,
you.
we do record all of these, so you can go to our website, and in probably another week or so, we'll have the recording up on there, and you can watch the recording.
Okay, thanks again. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Nicholas, did you have any other questions? You can put them in the chat if you have any. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes. Okay, well, Tiffany, I think that's it for today, and we can just touch base again soon, I guess, right?
That one was loaded with lots of good back and forth in the chat, which was good.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I think that was great.
Thank you, Gina. So she left. Okay.
I think Gina
All right.
is-
Alicia, have a great evening.
Yeah.
All right. See
Thank
you.
you. You too.
Bye.
All right. Bye.